Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the tier level webinar for it's really truthfully, I guess, Sean, this would be what we would consider the first webinar for 2021 on where this is going to be. But this is going to be about the necessary steps that it's going to take to grow your restoration business in 2021. Sean and I, growth is, as long as you're moving forward, we believe that motion doesn't necessarily equal progress. But I think that growth, whether it's 1%, 10%, or 100%, at least you're moving the needle. But what we're going to talk about is what is going to be the difference makers for meteoric growth over the next year. I'm going to go ahead and toot our horn. Sean is the founder and CEO of this company. I'm the VP of sales. But tier level was so proud, not only through digital marketing, but consulting and sales development and education, responsible for generating over $100 million in new revenue for our clients. So we were so happy to be a part of that. And I think that it all boils down to is because we worked in this industry or work actively in this industry. So we're not just a digital marketing company who's throwing darts at a map. So Sean, I'm going to let you lead and I'll be here to fill in the blanks. So it's turning it over to you, sir.
Awesome. So today's topic is the necessary steps to grow your restoration business for 2021. I can tell you I'm very excited about this topic because about 8 years ago when I left Nashville, Tennessee, I worked for a major corporate player in the restoration industry, and I had the opportunity to take over a franchise. And from there, we were able to build an infrastructure that went from 3 million to 10 plus million. And a lot of that was building the right team, hiring, the specific right people like Eddie Green, who went on to become the #1 salesperson for the organization as well. I will be honest with you, it is not just something where we're going to give you the answers today and it's going to be a quick turnkey solution. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of passion. It takes a lot of drive. We're going to kind of simplify that to what that foundation looks like. And throughout the year, we're going to be doing more webinars like this that will expand some of these individual topics as well. But if you're an owner or you're a manager or you work for an organization, no matter what side of the company you're on, this is going to be relevant to you. This is going to force you to ask yourself the question, am I really doing all that I can do? And you might look at this today and say, wow, this is extremely overwhelming. And that's okay. It's not that we're trying to make it overwhelming. We're not trying to make it hard, but we're basically want to give you the truth. We want to give you exactly what it takes to get to that next level. And that's what's really important, because you can start picking and choosing different areas of what we're about to talk about today, but that will ultimately lead to minimal success and not 100%, 100+% success that I'm sure you're looking for the new year. Now, full disclaimer, this is mentally exhausting when we get into this. This is not something, when it comes to sales and being the best and being the revenue driver in your local market, it is not going to be easy. But through that hard work and determination, the ceiling is unlimited. I mean, there is no cap on how far you can go and where you can take that. So I want to start out by saying, hold on 1 second, I'm going to move my slide here in a second. Okay. The first thing I want to really kind of disclose is stop the wondering. Stop, doing things that haven't worked year in and year out. And many of you know exactly what I'm talking about. You've been hiring salespeople. You've been telling them maybe what to do. You've been giving them online training from your corporate office, or if you're an independent, you're trying to pull resources together. You're like, go out and run routes. Go out and do this. And you're doing all these actions and you're hoping it produces something, but it's probably not. And a lot of that is maybe they're having some success, but what does that success really look like if they follow what we're about to share with you today?
Yeah, and the thing about it, it's ironic because I just had this conversation with a restoration owner from another major player, another big box franchise organization. He said, I just don't understand. He said, why we're not having the success. And whenever he started explaining their processes, he was still operating on the law of averages, still operating on the route principle, where you go out and you want to get 20 stops a day and you're handing out business cards and gifts. And trinkets and branded materials and hoping that that's going to make you memorable in the market space. And I'm going to tell you right now, if that's what you are doing, that is why you're not achieving that meteoric success that what you're thinking about. Clients want to meet people. They want to know that you bring value, because you're going to have to escalate yourself, especially in the commercial realm, into that upper echelon relationship of like their pastor, their husband, their wife, their best friend, these people, so that when a disaster happens, you are first and foremost on their mind. You are memorable. And I'm going to tell you, if you think that handing these things out and just doing what every single other restoration company does is going to make you memorable, look around an insurance office and look at the spoils of war and see the Paul Davis calendar on their desk, the Belfour jar of candy, the Service Master magnets, the box of cookies that was just left by ATI, the interstate pens that are in their thing. It doesn't make you memorable. You need to get in there and provide valuable conversation about loss ratios, about retention, about how you can help build their book of business and speak their language. And we're going to get into that. But I would challenge you guys that if you're doing the things that other restoration companies are doing and expecting success out of that, that is the true definition of insanity. And in order to get where you've never been, you've got to be willing to do what you've never done.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So many of you have been in this business for several years, and you have to stop the madness. You have to stop the insanity. If it's not working, if you're not seeing the desired results that you're looking for, then why do you keep doing it? Why do you keep toying with the same employees, the same team members that really don't give a shit, that really don't care? And a lot of those principles are going to come into it. When we hired our sales team, they lived, breathed, and slept restoration. I mean, they would go to bed with a positive anxiety that maybe their phone would ring and they would get out of bed in the middle of the night and help somebody in need. And that was the determination. It wasn't an 8 to 5 type position. Now there's a lot of people out there, that's all they're looking for. They want to be 8 to 5. They want the bare minimum success. They're happy with their base pay. They're not even really driven by making more money for themselves, which ultimately plays out to hurt your organization, because if they're not hungry, then how is your business going to grow? Because I'm more than certain everyone on this call has a desire to see more money in their pocket, more money for their company, and so forth. So I think the fact that you're just here on this webinar kind of showcases that that's important to you. So the first thing we want to talk about is, I talked about 3 areas that you might be struggling with. And these are kind of the foundational principles that it takes to have an ultra high performance sales team. And those are education, accountability, and consistency. This is not something that you can start to pick and choose when we get into these different areas and say, wow, I really like this, I really like that. We are going to showcase what we consider the bare minimum when it comes to running an effective sales team. And this is not just the restoration industry. This is, sales in general. How committed are you? How passionate are you? When it comes to education, are you willing to learn? Are you willing to learn new things? Are you willing to step outside your comfort zone? And then when you go down this list, what are you doing to be accountable to that? What are you doing to showcase that? What are you doing to hold not only yourself, but your entire company both ways accountable? And then it ultimately comes down to consistency, which kind of plays right in with the accountability factor, is are you repeating and doing these things over and over? The things that work, not necessarily things that don't work. Things might have to be adjusted. Things might have to be learned, but that's part of the process. And that consistency is key, because I cannot tell you how many times we speak about different topics in sales in the restoration industry, and people try it for 2 weeks and are like, oh, it doesn't work. Well, no shit, it doesn't work. Until you put the passion and the desire and the day-to-day execution, it's not going to work. Nothing happens. There's no get-rich-quick scheme here. This is about dealing with commercial buildings, residential relationships, and the fact that people have lost everything. And if you want to half-ass that process, then that's the type of results you're going to get. So we're going to dig into education, and we're going to talk about, like, when you think about education, and I love this picture of a soundboard, because there's a lot of buttons, a lot of nozzle things and everything on there. And a lot of times people, when they look at something like this, they're like, what does everything do? Why is it important? But when it comes to mixing and mastering music, every single knob has an intricate, important part. And if you leave something out, from the lows to the highs to the mid to the volume to the, whether the sound's coming out of the left or the right side, it does have a negative impact on the final product. So understanding every component when it comes to the restoration industry is extremely important. And what we have here on this next slide is a list of all the different, or at least some of the basic educational areas that you need to be familiar with. And I'm going to let Eddie kind of go through a few of these and start explaining why each of these areas are so important, especially as we come into 2021.
So the first thing that you're probably doing when you see this slide is like, oh my God, it looks like somebody just threw up all over the monitor. And you know what? This is exactly what it takes to be successful in this industry. Because, if you look like blended sales, how many of you guys are actually would consider yourself masters of blended sales, which include, and if you're saying no, you're going to have a very difficult time, because the world has changed. If you're not good on the phones, you're not good at being able to conduct business virtually, and you're not good at face-to-face, you're just requiring on the standard door knocking that you were doing to be able to go out there and generate or prospect prospective clients. It's not going to work for you. Do you understand and have mastered every part of the sales cycle, from everything from pre-call planning all the way back to all the way through to follow-up, and on the 5 other areas that are in between that? Have you mastered every one of those facets? So when you get to the objections portion, which would be in your validation section, do you have your top 10 objections written down, the ones that you hear all the time, so that they just flow, your rebuttals flow? Because as a salesperson, you shouldn't expect everybody to tell you yes. Do you have digital marketing campaign with a company that actually understands your vertical, that can speak your language? Contingency plans, knowing your competition. I think this is huge. Do you intimately know your competition, what space they operate in, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses? You hear, keep your friends close, your enemies closer. You have to intimately know these things. Do you priority respond? And then we get into reporting, tracking, documentation. How many of you guys right now can say, this is my percentage of residential versus commercial sales for the year? This is what I've collected. This is what I still have in the pipeline. Here's my priority response close percentage. Here's my no job percentage of all the calls that I received just this year, and why every one of these were a no job. So if you cannot answer those things, I'm questioning whether or not you truly own your space. As a sales professional, I'm basically running my own business. My territory is my business, and if I'm going to own it, whenever the owner or my direct report asks me, "What have you sold for the year?" If I answer I don't know, then there's one of 2 reasons: either he didn't provide me the tools that I need to be successful, or I just don't give a shit. And if he didn't provide me the tools, then he needs to do that. But if I don't give a shit, you don't need to be here. And that's it. I mean, effective meetings. How many closing meetings are you scheduling a week? Do you know how to close? Do you know when it's appropriate to close? Sometimes we try to close too quickly. Sometimes our closes don't make sense. Do we have a target list that we're doing, a top 10, a top 25 wish list? Do you understand horizontal and vertical influence? I hope to God that some of you are going, wow, I haven't even touched 10% of this. That's okay. That's why we're here. This is what it takes. Do you know your equipment? Do you know how many amps your Snail versus your Trimax pulls? Do you know how many pints per day your dehues are doing? Do you know when it's appropriate to use an LGR versus a desiccant dehumidifier? Well, I'm a sales rep. I don't need to know that stuff. Yes, you do. Because the more you know about your vertical, the more you know about what you do, the easier it is to educate your client on the how and the why.
Absolutely. And when you look at all these topics, I mean, we can literally go in for hours, if not multiple hours, on different areas. So like blended sales, sales cycle. I mean, these are very in-depth topics, but when you look at these topics, the point of this slide, to put it up there and you're like, wow, it is overwhelming. But if you can't answer effectively how to do that, this is the opportunity where you need to go out and learn. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just from us. It could be anywhere. I mean, you can go out and research the sales cycle. You can read books on blended sales, especially this year. Jed Blunt, Virtual Selling, released an incredible book on virtual or blended sales, virtual selling, and so forth. Digital marketing. There are so many moving parts when it comes to LinkedIn, to Facebook. What platform do I use? What platform do I not need to use? When am I using too much? What are we doing from the business? What do I do personally? All of those things. Contingency plans. I mean, the technology of what you can do on the forefront to not only do three-dimensional mapping with Matterport and other technology to build relationships for pre-loss conditions. So when something does happen, is unbelievable how many people are not taking advantage of that. I mean, you literally have opportunity to understand, learn their buildings inside and out, all of their emergency contacts, scan the building, mark shut-off valves, mark shut-off switches from the electrical side all the way down to the water side. I mean, you can provide this information.
But even right there, just stop for just 2 seconds, Sean. So on that right there, why do they need to know, where to shut off the fire suppression system? As a restoration professional, you probably are like, well, let it run, let's make the job bigger. But if you can be a valuable educational resource to them, if you've attended any of our webinars or Restoration Sales University, you probably know the answer to this. But if you haven't, how many gallons of water does a commercial sprinkler system put out per minute? It's between, all depending upon the size of the building, 250 to 500 gallons a minute. So if they take and let that thing run 45 minutes, you've got 20,000 gallons of water sitting in their facility. Well, if you can teach them, hey, well, here's how you would shut the system off. Now, there are proprietary states like Colorado, California, Pennsylvania that they have to actually have the fire departments set them off. But other states, like where we're from and most of the states, you can teach them how to shut those things off. Now you have become a valuable partner to their business continuity. They're going to be able to continue to keep their doors open because of the education that you provide. Who's more important? The guy that doesn't ever tell them anything and lets the water run and fill their facility up, and it's a one-time, one-off, they overcharge, they come in there and do the wrong thing, push them out of the way? Or you, who provides the education, the relationship, and the strategic partnership for their business continuity? Who's more important to them, you or the other guy? That's an easy answer. It is you.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, when you look at this list and you're like, well, where do I get started? Well, it's one of those things, like, you can't really just pick out, what's more important than the other. What I can tell you is our team, when we were running an effective team that built a $10+ million business, they were well versed in all of these areas, or the majority of them. If they were weak in certain areas, we had the resources and we had the team members to kind of compensate for that. But you really have to look at this list like, this is a complete picture of what our sales team needs to know. What do your weekly sales training meetings look like? Do you even have one? What do your goal setting practices look like? What do your weekly objectives look like for setting daily, weekly objectives for your team? We're going to get into that in the accountability section. But all of this information and building that depth of knowledge will make your team unstoppable for increasing revenue in 2021. Now, the next thing we want to talk about is accountability. And, learning all of those things on the previous slide is great. But without execution, without boots on the ground, without day-to-day implementation, it means absolutely nothing. It's like reading the most amazing book in the world, watching the most amazing webinar, and not doing a damn thing about it. And that's really where accountability comes into play. And believe it or not, I mean, not many of you selected that of struggling, but I think what you're going to realize is when you go through the education and you go through the steps that you should be doing weekend, monthly, daily, etc., you're going to see how much it really takes. Now, a lot of this might seem like busy work, but when you start compiling that data and that record of information, now you start building information to put together ROI reports for your company, from the digital marketing side to the direct sales side to the online sales that are coming in from the digital marketing, and you can really start to cultivate that. So accountability is probably one of the most important things when you talk about these three, they're all equally important, but this is one of the areas where a lot of people are like, oh, I'm accountability, but you don't realize how unaccountable you are. And that's what we're going to talk about. So this is a list, and this is from an annual perspective all the way down to a daily. Are you doing these things for your company? Are you setting weekly objectives from the ownership or the management level down to your sales team? What do your sales meetings look like? Are they a waste of time? Are you focused on education and teaching in those weekly meetings, but going over those objectives, getting updates, status updates where things are? Weekly target additions. Are you building your database? Are you even, I mean, as simple as it is right now, I hear excuses all the time. Well, we're shut down and can't go visit anybody. There's a little something called the internet. And guess what? It hasn't gone away and it hasn't shut down. And that can allow you to find emails, phone numbers, personal information about people you want to cultivate and build relationships with. What do your daily progress emails look like to your team? If you don't have a team, are you doing them for yourself? What are you doing to hold yourself accountable to your owner? You're like, well, my owner doesn't ask for that. Well, you know what? Put it together. Make it together. Tell your ownership team what your daily objectives and progress are if you're not receiving that. You know, what do your daily social media posts, both for the company and personal, look like? Are you updating your website weekly with blogs and content and pictures to keep those search engines with fresh, relevant content that's related to the seasons of the demographic and landscape of where you live? ROI report. Many of you have probably never put together one of these before, but what does it look like on a monthly, a quarterly, and an annual basis? If you're paying somebody or you're receiving money, what are you producing to show your ROI? If you have a sales team, if you're an owner, are you evaluating for every dollar I spend, what am I bringing back in? And that's everywhere, digital marketing, business development team, etc. You have to track that ROI. Do you even know what the average job costs are for your entire business? What's your average residential water job? What's your average residential fire job versus residential or commercial fire job? These numbers are so important because when you start to set your goals for the year, how are you going to get there if you don't know how you're going to get there? So that's why that really becomes important. On the flip side, what type of weekly progress emails are you getting from your team or providing to your ownership team to say, this is what was accomplished based on the objectives that we did for this week? Do you have a marketing budget? Do you have a sales team goal, not only for the company, but do you have them for the individual sales rep? So if the company's goal is to do 20 million, what percentage of each sales rep needs to contribute to get to that company goal? Do you visually display your goal? Do you have them where you're looking at them all the time? I know Garrett, who's on this webinar, is currently in the process. He's given me his visions and the different objectives that he wants to accomplish for the year to have on canvases printed in his office. What does your target list look like? Are you continuing to add to it? Are you updating that? Is it in a shared document like Google Sheet or somewhere where you can be accountable? Is it going into your CRM, whether your corporation has one or you have an independent CRM? What does your emergency preparedness program look like? And how do you monitor that? How do you make sure it's being followed up with? So if you do a scan or documentation in a commercial building, what are you doing to make sure they're being followed up with every 30, 60 days? And what type of questions are you asking when you go back out? Talking about the hiring strategy, there is very little accountability when it comes to hiring sales reps, and it is so frustrating. We completely got rid of the old way of thinking when it comes to hiring, and we went through a whole different process from the initial introduction to the interview process to the day they step foot on the job, and that really made a big change. And what type of weekly educational information are you providing for your team to get better, whether it's in their sales meetings or just ongoing, or they're doing it in their personal time to get better? Eddie, would you like to address some of that overall from the accountability standpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd even like to add to it, as a former director of business development, some of the other things that I did, do you run GPS reports, not so that you can micromanage your sales team, but just so that, occasionally you can have a conversation and be like, hey, I noticed that you were sitting in this convenience store parking lot for 2 hours last week. What was going on? Are you managing work efficiency, especially in blended sales? We pay people to do jobs. We also pay them to be grown adults. I don't want to micromanage them, but sometimes just the awareness that I have my finger on the pulse of what's going on with my team prevents them from developing bad habits. So I just spoke with an owner in California and had told him, I said, look, I said, since you guys are a new restoration company on the scene, I said, I would get my sales team making 40 to 60 phone calls a day. I said to agents and everybody, just to get your name out there and try to engage in some virtual meetings. You want to know what the owner said? So that's too aggressive. And I said, okay, well, let's define that. If it's 60 phone calls in an 8-hour workday and they have average 5 to 7 minutes per phone call, they're only working 7 phone calls an hour at 37 and a half minutes an hour. So they're getting almost 23 minutes off every single hour. So should I only pay them for 63% of effective work? Because that's all they're giving me. And that's at 60. But do we know, those kinds of things? If there's sometimes the conversations may go a little longer, but 90% of them aren't going to go that long. So I don't think that 60 is being aggressive at all. I think that's a very conservative number. And out in California where they're at, they can't go door knock. We're wasting time on windshield time trying to go get these people to engage. So are we managing work efficiency? So I think that with all of this, the weekly objectives and all about this, I think that having a pulse on your team and holding them accountable to the things that need to happen is key to the success of any organization. It's key to the success of each individual rep. I, as their leader, am never going to look myself in the mirror each day and say, I didn't give them the tools they needed to be successful. That is not going to happen. So then their failure will be on them. And it will be one of two reasons. Either they don't have the ability to be able to perform at an ultra high performer level, or they don't care. And either way, they don't need to work for me. Period. And we're not making those determinations. We're keeping warm bodies in place for the sake of having a salesperson in the position that is bleeding your organization.
Yeah, and that's something that you really determine when you get into these ROI report on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis. Is you really start to look at where's money being spent and what are we getting back. As a business owner, you need to look at every single dollar. If you put it out there, what are you getting back in return? And that's really how you determine your return on investment. You're hiring technicians to make a certain profit margin. You're hiring salespeople to grow sales. You're hiring people in your office staff to make sure you're collecting money. If you're losing money on all those positions when you combine them, then something's not working for your business. And it's really where it gets into that mentality. I read a great book last year called Profit First. And it really kind of determines, like, are you setting aside profit? Do you understand profit? Do you understand that profit margin that's required for your business? Because you didn't start your business just to break even, hire a bunch of people and get by. You hired a business to make a living, to make a future for yourself, to build something that's worth something. And the more that you focus on these areas, you can determine, get rid of that negative weight that's holding your company down and start putting the right people in place. Now, listen, the right people might cost money. The right team might cost money. But the long-term perspective when you're doing these things, it cannot fail. I cannot tell you, we had spent a lot of money when I took over as the director of business development to start hiring more people, but to hire the right people and put the right strategy in place is what made all the difference from taking a company from 3 million to 10 plus million. And it absolutely worked. So
well, and the last thing too is we did get a question that said, what about the time it takes for follow-up emails and other research? And I think that as long as in leadership that you can justify that they are using their time efficiently and effectively, and it's not just an excuse, because I've seen people sit at a computer and accomplish virtually nothing, and you'll hear us say all the time that motion doesn't equal progress. And if you want to judge that, then just jump on a rocking horse and see how far you get. You'll be in motion all day, but you're not going to get anywhere. So as long as you can justify that they are being effective and efficient, then you have to build that in there, because follow-up is the last step of the sales cycle. So I agree that it's highly important, but make sure that that's actually what they're doing.
Absolutely. So when we get to consistency, so we talked about education, we talked about accountability, but when you look at all those things, they're great. But if you don't do it every single day throughout all 365 days of the year, you're not going to fulfill that destiny that is awaiting for your business. And that's what I really want you guys to focus on is, for the new year, do you have a time management schedule? Do you have a written book in front of you? Like I have been using a lot lately, a blank notebook. I call it my big idea book, beyond my schedule, which we use everything from Ink and Vault to Clever Fox Planner, that will really manage your time and goals and things like that. But what are you doing to make sure that you're staying consistent with the accountability and you're continuing to learn and educate yourself? And really, it's simple, that you have to look at it from a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annually perspective. Like, what are your daily requirements out of what we just talked about that you need to make sure you're accomplishing every day? What does it look like on a weekly basis? Are you following up? Are you giving a synopsis of what happened this week? Those synopses, don't look at them like you're just giving it to somebody to prove you're doing something. Look at it like you're using it to measure your own success. Like, what did I do the week prior? What did I do the week before that? That's where the monthly and quarterly consistency reports, ROI reports come into play. Is when you start looking at your own information, like, why did I waste so much time doing this when I could have been doing more of this that actually delivered results? And you will start to see those patterns. You will start to see the impact that you're making, but it's not going to happen in 1 month. It's going to take month over month. You've got to see the movement. You've got to see that needle move. And the only way you can do that is by collecting that data, using that data for your personal benefit, but also for the company's benefit. And then at the end of the year, you can take all that information and say, wow, look where we started, look where we ended up, and what are we going to do for the next year to get better? You start doing this for 3, 4, 5 years, you're going to have a playbook for a pretty successful organization well beyond the restoration industry, but it's going to give you that foundation and that comfort level that, wow, something is really working, and here's what we've determined what it is, and here's where we're going to invest more in what's working so we can see that ROI come back in greater numbers.
Yeah. Do you actually, as leaders, especially Sean, talking to the weekly point of view, do you actually have a list of strengths and weaknesses for your sales team, of the things, so that the weaknesses that you can go out and go help build a strong foundation to overcome those weaknesses? You're only going to know that by spending time in the field with them, reading their agendas, looking at the quality of conversations that they're having, that you may find out that looking at the paper would be like, wow, these guys are making a lot of contacts in a week. Well, that can be a bad thing. A lot of contacts in a week can mean that they're not actively getting past the gatekeeper. They're not having strong conversations with COIs. They're just in and out, So do you have the wherewithal to be able to take and have that kind of an analytical view of your sales team? And then what as leadership are we doing to improve upon those things? And we're reporting this all back to your own leadership that you're reporting to. It'd be like, look, here's my plan of action. I noticed that Bob, last week had X amount of contacts. So I'm going to spend some time in the field with him this week, evaluating the conversations that he's having and seeing if maybe we can help him move the needle a little bit. So when Sean and I talked about this at the very start of this, it's going to be mentally exhausting, and hopefully you're starting to get a grasp of exactly why it's going to be that way.
So what questions do you have? I want to really open this up to, any specific questions. It could be an area in the education. It could be an accountability of how to implement that accountability consistently. This is a time we wanted to kind of get through this as quick as we could so you guys can ask questions of what it takes. Do you guys feel that you have been doing these things? Do you feel like there's a lot of room for improvement? I'd love to hear your feedback. Go ahead and put your question or comments in the chat box, so we can kind of address a few of those. But I really want to get a feel for what some of you guys are thinking. How many of you are making it a commitment to educate yourselves on a monthly basis right now? Are you guys doing that? Are you seeing any results from that? And what kind of impact is that?
Well, I think that, importantly, Sean and I are going to, one of the things that we have is we have a 52 week training protocol for business development teams. 52 weeks, there's 52 weeks in a year, and education is key. You can never out care. You can never out educate enough whenever it comes into what you're doing, so, how many of you guys would say that knowing the equipment intimately, what it does, what kind of amperages it pulls, how many pints per day it pulls, when to use certain pieces of equipment. As a salesperson, would you say that possibly that could potentially be your weakness? And if it is your weakness, then what would be your plan of action to overcome that weakness? It's do you understand mitigation backwards and forwards and the techniques that are involved? Do you understand how to be able to go in and articulate what the needs would be for each prospective client that you're going to have, and how are you coming to that conclusion of how you develop that needs analysis for them? So, or how many of you guys are sitting here staring at the screen going, holy shit, like a deer caught in the headlights going, oh my God, I had no idea that it was this involved. The true test to growth is to be honest with yourself, and to say, what, this is where I'm lacking, because iron sharpens iron. And Sean and I don't have all the answers, but we're on a constant thirst for knowledge to be better, because I can promise you we have not arrived, nor will we ever arrive. We are going to be learning until the day we die. So if Sean just put up this deal, if you want to schedule a one-on-one call with us after the first of the year, please let us know, because you're not going to bug us. This is our passion, is to educate people and watch people get better.
Yeah, and we honestly we've really put together what it takes to build that, incremental gains of $1 million, $2 million plus in revenue. And we've launched a program that's going to be coming out in 2021 called Tier Level Elite. And it's basically going to be where we really focus on not only all the educational aspects, but help on the sales management side. Whether you're a sales manager, it's just giving you the foundation. But a program like this is, there's no better way to implement accountability and consistency than looking at something like this. And this is not a program that's designed to cost money for your organization. This is something that is developed for you to see those revenue increases, to help recruit the right team member, to hold them accountable on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis, but get that team on the momentum to where they can start seeing $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, but also continue to build that team so you can start building more revenue as their future arrives. So this is something, this is just an overview of free, no commitment. If you want to learn more about that, just click the chat box right now or the poll up on the screen, and we'd be more than happy to send you some available times, or even just to talk about where you guys are currently at. This is not something to sell you anything or something like that. There's very specific organizations that will qualify for this program, but we want to have it out there, and we want to be available to help you, even if on a small scale where you're like, we're really struggling. But we are going to be doing a ton of free webinars in 2021 that start to hit a lot of those education sectors. So getting it in bits and pieces will definitely be readily available to you if you're on this webinar right now. So other than that, I'd like to open up any other additional questions, thoughts.
So Rachel said that she tends to get scatterbrained at times with all that's going on, really wanting to make time to learn more and attend more trainings. I think that's absolutely fantastic. Probably two facets on that, Rachel or Rochelle. Two facets on that. One, get a high performance planner and start writing everything down, because you can let the whirlwind manage you, or you can manage the whirlwind. But if you have a written plan, whenever you do get taken away by something like what Garrett just happened, so kudos to him. He just got a huge commercial flood. He has to run, but he said his numbers has improved since attending RSU. But if he has a written plan, when he goes and handles that client, he still has plan A to come back to. That will help reduce the scatterbrain mentality. Set up a weekly agenda, that your people are day to day, have their day planned out, of who they're going to see, but not only not what organizations they're going to see, but who's the COI, what research have they done on the organization for pre-call planning, so that when they do get taken away, they can always come back to where they left off. That scattershot, scatterbrain mentality, Andrew Bollinger, he's with Water Out. He says the same thing. Right now, they're struggling with blended sales because that landscape has changed. Sean and I can help with that. we can definitely help with the blended sales environment. So click the yes, send me some available dates. Let's jump on a one-on-one call, and we'll show you how to be more effective in blended sales. Rochelle, it's our pleasure. So we appreciate you as well for taking time out of your day to come listen to us talk. So we appreciate you just as much as you appreciate us.
Well, great. Does anybody have any additional questions? I hope this was helpful for you guys today. Like I said, if you have any questions on that last screen with mine and Eddie's email, feel free to reach out to us if you don't want to talk about that. Oh, actually, Tristan just wrote, during the holidays, what is the best way to reach out to companies that are not in the office?
Well, I think that the important thing is that whenever you're going to do it, first off, companies, there are going to be a lot of companies that are going to shut down for the holidays, but focus on essential businesses, focus on hotels, grocery stores, what verticals are going to remain open, restaurants, that are going to remain open during that time. The CEOs are still going to be there, or the COIs, are still going to be there, and use your blended sales, set up phone calls first to try to engage. Insurance agents may shut down, but will still be responding to email. So utilize email campaigns, text campaigns, things like that, and try to use it to set up face-to-face meetings. Maybe right now is not the best time to be able to set up a face-to-face meeting, but set them up for after the first of the year. But you're starting the relationship process now. So if you would, like I said, focus on the essential businesses, the places that aren't going to close, do your research, understand who the COIs are, utilize your platforms like LinkedIn and social media to be able to engage on those kinds of things and schedule meetings for after the first of the year.
Do you feel that education activities are the best content for signing clients to long-term partnerships, Eddie?
I think that education is always key. The differentiation between you and every other restoration company is starting with the how and the why. Why do you do what you do? What differentiates you from the competition? But more importantly, open-ended dialogue questions that are going to ask about things like, well, what would you need from having a relationship with a restoration company like myself? So many people don't do that. They show up and throw up. They say, this is what we can do for you. Well, you may sit there and drone on and on and on and on and never hit a hot button that they need to hear. Case in point, I had a grocery store chain that I told him, I finally asked him as a risk manager, I said, what keeps you up at night? He said, oddly enough, it's not fire, water, or mold. He said, it's spoilage. And I came up with a solution for spoilage by creating relationships with refrigerated trucking companies, having his stores wired for direct transfer switches so that we could just back a generator up, throw the switch, and have their coolers back operational. I became his biggest hero because of that, and it had nothing to do with restoration. But are we having those kinds of conversations with people? Are we really asking them, hey, what would you need from me? What would be the things that nobody else has ever talked to you about? Who has ever taken the time to sit down and care more about you than my agenda? And that's really what it boils down to. And then when they tell you, that's where your education is going to shine, because now you're going to be more in consultative selling approach, more into solutions-based selling, and meeting and overcoming their specific needs. And now you've moved from a vendor to a strategic partner for their success. Huge difference. Biggest difference between being a salesperson and an ultra high performer is being that consultative, solutions-based salesperson that is going to be a strategic partner. You've moved from the vendor status into strategic partnership. That is a huge relationship gain right there over your competition. Absolutely, Andrew. My pleasure.
Well, great. Well, if you guys don't have any other questions, feel free to put them in if you have any last minutes. Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate your comment there. Andrew, appreciate yours as well. But no, if you guys have any other additional questions, feel free to email us. We also had our cell phones up on the screen as well. A few of you reached out for some one-on-ones. We will send you some emails for that today to get that scheduled for early on in the first of the year. So Andrew asked, any more reading suggestions for sales teams? Where do we begin, Eddie?
Yeah, God, we could go on and on. So there's 3 books that I'm in the middle of right now. One of them I'm almost finished with, which was Virtual Selling by Jeb Blunt. The other one, and forgive me if I don't know the authors because I don't have them in front of me, but one of them is called Selling in Place. It is about a sales team that sells multi-million-dollar deals, never meets anyone face to face. It's all done either virtually or over the phones. That is just absolutely phenomenal. And then the last one is Go Givers Sell More. And this one has really impacted my life because I believe in servant's heart mentality. And it's really about, we're not asking for the sale, we're receiving a sale. And it's talking about really being a giver and a sales mentality. And that book really has probably had more of an impact on my psyche since Sales EQ. Which again is another book by Jeb Blunt. So, and I know Sean's got quite a few that he likes too. So I'll let him tell you a
Yeah,
few of
I
them he
mean,
likes.
it's just so many. Profit First was a real eye opener for me when it came to understanding profit in business. Anything by Jeb Blunt. Jeffrey Gitomer is more of an old school sales writer, very popular. I'm a big Gary Vaynerchuk fan, so anything that he releases, he has a lot of online content that's free as well. So there's a lot of good books out there. It just kind of depends on what I'm currently reading in the moment. But I mean, I would definitely say Jeb Blunt is one of the hot books to get right now. And he has a lot of books on sales, from sales psychology to handling objections. So I would highly recommend checking him out as well. And if there's any, specific niche type areas you'd like to read about, feel free to reach out to us. We'll share anything from our reading list as well.
I think the important thing though is to develop one. You see Andrew asking, what books. I think if you don't have like a list of, I would probably put 12 books on your reading list, one per month, as a goal just for 2021. I hate to read. I hate it. And, since I have started reading, it has really expanded my sales acumen, but more importantly, my sales mindset, to be able to see it from other people. The way they do it, the successes they have. A lot of times, Jeb Blunt, I really relate to him and the way he writes. So, he doesn't know it, but if I was going to consider anyone my sales mentor, it would be anything that Jeb Blunt puts out. But also to podcasts, podcasts are huge. If you don't like to read, listen to podcasts. If you don't really have a filter, Andy Frisella is absolutely fantastic. Jeb Blunt has Sales Gravy. I have Selling People, Not a Process. So go subscribe to that. Sean has The Niche Experience. Both have tremendous value in the sales process and what we bring to the table. Not trying to toot our own horn, but we get a lot of really positive feedback from both of our podcasts. So again, mine is Selling People, Not a Process, and Sean is The Niche Experience. Go listen to both of those. It'll expand your sales acumen as well.
Well, great, guys. Well, if you guys don't have any more questions, we're going to go ahead and end now. But we appreciate you guys all taking time out of your day. I hope this was helpful, beneficial for you guys. Have a Merry Christmas if we don't engage with you guys before this Friday. And hope you guys are really gearing up for a great 2021. Remember, this is the starting point. Whether you talk to us or you take this and run, what you do, how you execute, how you implement, and hold yourself accountable is going to make the difference for 2021 in your business.
Absolutely. Merry Christmas, guys. It was our pleasure and honor. Be safe. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care, guys.